we all feel it's very important to have these meetings in public, and although they're not here with us, they're at a distance, we want that to continue. And we have some officers with us as well as elected members, and so I'd just like to take this opportunity, and I'm sure people will agree, to thank our senior leadership team and our Director of Public Health for their efforts over the last 18 months. It's been a very difficult time, and they've had hundreds of staff redeployed to the effort, and it's been phenomenal, so I hope everybody agrees with me on that. Thank you. For the public, this meeting will be webcast and a record retained on the Council website. For those at home viewing the webcast, I'd like to inform you that if you look just above the video, you'll see a Resources tab. Select this, and a link to the agenda will appear in the right-hand side. This will allow you to open the agenda in PDF form and follow the discussion and the debate. Thank you. Would officers like to introduce themselves? Thanks.
Hi, I'm Nikki Butterworth, and I am the Director of Neighbourhood Services.
Hi, I'm Andy McCartan, the Assistant Director for Leisure, Libraries and Customer Engagement.
I'm Colin Hughes, the Solicitor for the committee.
And I'm Mike Jones, the Principal Democratic Services Officer who's taking the minutes.
Evening members, Chair Halewood, Director of Resources.
Down to me, I'm Peter Aspinall, Strategic Library Manager.
Hi, I'm Julie Webster, Director of Public Health.
Hi, I'm David McKenzie. I'm the manager here at the Floral Pavilion and of the Hospitality Services.
Thank you. So do we have any apologies for absence? I've not received any. Great, everybody here. And do members have any declarations of interest? I'd like to invite members to declare any interest. Members are asked to consider whether they have any disclosable pecuniary interests and/or any other relevant interest in connection with any items on this agenda. If so, declare them and state the nature of the interest. No, all easy so far, right? So we have the minutes from the last meeting, which was on the 3rd of March 2021. Are we happy to look at those minutes and agree them? Do I have a proposer or a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Brame. Sorry?
Do you have a second?
Yes, I know. Do we have a second? Anybody to second? Anybody that was here would be preferable. So Councillor Kenny or Councillor Johnson, happy to second?
Happy to second, yeah.
I'm happy to second. Oh.
Lovely, thank you, thanks, okay. I haven't received notification of any public questions. I haven't received any statements and petitions. Are there any questions by members? I haven't received them in time.
I did have a question, but it could come up in further on in the conversation if I can't ask it now.
Okay, were you unable to submit it in advance?
No, I wasn't, unfortunately. It's something that's come up just over the last 24 hours.
I'm happy to take that now.
I thought members could ask questions on the night, but maybe I've got that wrong.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that now.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Appreciate that. So this is basically a question that, given the success of our year as Borough of Culture, what I think would be really great to see, Chair, would be the full and comprehensive outline of the council team's arts and cultures team's programme for the year. So if officers could let us have that quite soon, that would be really excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spriggs. I tend to agree there. I had put on the work programme, we've got two really interesting things. The 175th anniversary of Birkenhead Park, which is obviously going for heritage status, but we also have Her Royal Majesty the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. So yes, I'll be keen to see all of that, and I'm sure all members agree on that. It can go on the work programme for a full presentation. Thank you. So this brings us on to our first item, really, which is the library's consultation update. I'd like to invite Nikki Butterworth to introduce her report.
Thank you, Chair and members. So this report follows on from the November committee last year, where approval was given to commence the development of a new library strategy and in support of this work, commence the engagement with residents, partners and stakeholders in designing and delivering a modern and sustainable service that meets the needs of our communities across the borough. This report provides a brief overview of the background of the project and an update on the progress of the work to date, how the libraries team have been engaging with our internal key stakeholders and partners, and some of the outcomes of those discussions and our next steps. And our key milestones is looking at the forthcoming public consultation. If I can just draw committee to the recommendations in the report, which is twofold. One is to note the actions being taken to deliver the public consultation on the draft library strategy, the proposed new model, and approve the proposed date of June the 28th to start that public consultation. And the second is to approve the proposed date for myself, the director, to bring a report to this committee in November of this year to present the final library strategy with the recommendations and accompanying findings and outcomes of the public consultation. Here tonight we have Peter Aspinall, who is the Strategic Libraries Manager, who is going to just present to you now a brief overview and some slides to take you through the summary of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate some of this we have already gone through as a committee, but with so many new members, it is certainly valuable to go through it again. So thank you if you're having to go over it again, but it will be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Yeah, okay. Yeah, can we have the first slide, please? Okay, yeah, I thought I'd just quickly give you a bit of background for those of you who didn't sort of see the report the first time. So there's 10 slides, but if that's okay with you, I'm going to go through these sort of fairly quickly. I think the most important part is where we're up to on the consultation. So this is what we're calling it's your library, your view, obviously on the draft library strategy and proposed delivery model. Next slide, please. So basically, that's what we're doing. We're consulting on proposals of the draft strategy. I think the aim there is really to sort of say, we're looking at an innovative solution. What we want to deliver is a modern and sustainable service that meets the different communities across Wirral. Thanks. Next slide, please. The vision is there, which was in the strategy, which you can read for yourselves. I think that's quite a challenging vision, but a really, really good one. Next slide, please. So in the strategy, we've actually got 4 priorities, and these link into the Libraries Connected Universal offers. We had a useful seminar yesterday on these. So what we tried to do is to make sure that we align our strategy to what's going on in the profession as a whole. Obviously, there's the 4 main priorities there. I don't propose to go into details about them, but the reading, information digital, culture and creativity, and health and well-being. Okay, next slide, please. So coming on, I think that first bullet point is the main point I want, I think we emphasised in the actual report. Current provision is not really viable, a sustainable option if we want to set out what's in the strategy. We want to look at working with residents and stakeholders, and I think these are the key words: co-designing and co-delivering a bespoke offer for each neighbourhood area. I think that's the sort of essence behind all of this this consultation. And we've sort of identified sort of possible models. These aren't just these models. These are something that we, possibly we could look at, which are on the next slide, please. So we've identified a central library flagship site similar to what's across the water and also down the road in Chester. So a flagship library as a tourism destination would be something that we would aspire to. Next slide, please. Neighbourhood libraries, so these are the next sort of size libraries. Co-location, I think, is the bullet point on there. I think is we need to explore those opportunities. Next slide, please. Brings us on to community libraries. Again, mentioning co-location, engaging with community residents. But these are actually supported by council staff. Next slide, please. And then we've got community managed libraries, which obviously are led and delivered libraries run by the community for the community, using volunteers, obviously accessing council library staff and infrastructure. Okay. And final slide, please. And then I just wanted to mention the virtual library. Obviously, since March 2020, that's been increasingly important. We've had lots of engagement on that because obviously the buildings haven't been open. We want to sort of see that as our 25th library, the virtual library. We also have a home reader service as well, which we want to try and expand to meet the needs of our communities who can't get into the libraries. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So that was just a presentation. So main point this evening was obviously to come along to give you like a checkpoint on our progress. Obviously, given the mandate you gave to us on the 23rd of November. As Nikki has said, there's the two key dates in there, 28th of June to start the public consultation and the 17th of November to bring a final report back to this committee. I just wanted to sort of look at the consultation and how we've actually sort of broken it down. 4 areas really I just want to sort of touch on tonight. One is about the project initiation and what we've done. Then obviously we've been engaging with departmental management teams, we've engaged with library staff, and then, as I've just sort of said, engaging with the public. So just bringing sort of the project initiation and our thoughts behind that. Number of key sort of factors that have influenced that timeline. We're working towards that 17th of November, so we're working back, towards that. Obviously, it's been quite a difficult period to do this. Obviously, with COVID remobilisation, there was the pre-election period, other consultations going on, leisure consultations. So we've built in some contingency to deliver for the 17th of November for the final report. So the first area that we have done is actually looking at stakeholders, look at departmental management teams. So I've presented to 6 DMTs so far. I've got another one to do next week. So what we've done to these DMTs is basically outline the proposals and given sort of participants the chance to engage with us in an informal way, given feedback opportunities. We've captured those responses, and I think in the report there's just one example of many, some of the feedback we've actually got, which I just can read out if you don't mind. Library service doesn't operate in isolation. It's a fundamental part of every part of the council, so it needs to be embedded in all that we do. It's effectively a community tool for us to engage with. And I think really from having started doing these presentations, it's been really important for us to sort of raise the profile of the library service, and even sort of in these initial weeks that we've done that, I think that's something that we've managed to achieve really. And from that, we've sort of started engaging with other forums. We've established networks with the Arts Council. We've spoke to Wirral Systems Inequalities, Domiciliary Care Forum. So basically from those 6 DMTs, we started, I think it seems to be nearly every week we're doing a presentation to some group, which is really important. As I said, we want to get our feet under the table there with everybody who we can do really. And I said I had a meeting with the Arts Council this morning, which is very productive, and they were sort of very appreciative that we've aligned our strategy to the universal offers, and it was really well received. So that was the sort of first bit we've done. The second bit we've also done was we thought it was important to include library staff and obviously trade unions as well, to give them the opportunity to influence and make suggestions. So we did a live event back on the 10th of May. We had 73 staff attended, which is 76% of our total staff. We made a recording of that presentation, so obviously people who couldn't attend have the opportunity to listen to it. We set up a mailbox to take up any questions, and those are still coming in from staff. Obviously, we didn't want staff just to be put on the spot, so we're doing an FAQs, so we're recording all those questions that come in. And obviously, staff themselves can obviously feed into the consultation as residents when it opens on the 28th of June, subject to your approval. Brings us on then finally to obviously the forthcoming public consultation. What we propose to do is that this will go live on the council's Have Your Say platform for a period of 6 to 8 weeks. What we've done, we've been working really hard on the questionnaire. We've carefully designed it in consultation with intelligence team and communication teams officers, so it's been a joint effort. So we're just sort of finalising that at the moment. What we've also done is we've done a comprehensive stakeholder mapping exercise as well, using the methodology that we should do on consultation. And what we will be doing is we'll be engaging with high priority stakeholders such as friends groups. So that's what we're going to be planning to do in the next few weeks. Obviously, to support this, we'll have a robust communications plan in place. We'll be engaging, be using social media, both existing and external channels, to obviously make sure that everybody's got the opportunity to do so. Obviously, the thing we're really keen to do is that, yes, we're trying to encourage people to go on, to go online, but obviously we know that a lot of our residents and people who use the libraries can't actually do that and prefer to do so with paper formats. So we're actually making sure those paper questionnaires are available in the central libraries and other community venues. So it's important that we don't disenfranchise anybody from doing that. So yes, we would like people to do it online, but also we want to make sure that people can fill in the forms, and if anybody's actually struggling with doing either of that, we can also look to possibly post out to residents if they prefer to do so. So I think we've covered all the options on that really. I think from my point of view, what I've actually learned is, and as we know around this table, I think when we've done consultations in the past, maybe it hasn't been the best way. I think we're still scarred to some extent from the Charters report from September 2009. I think it's been really important. We went back to that report and we sort of developed a matrix, and we've made sure that the mistakes that were made then won't be replicated again. So we've really been really keen to do that. I know one thing from that was identified as being missing was a needs analysis. So we're also doing a piece of work on a needs analysis, which we did back a few years ago, but we are refreshing that because that's a really important part of this the consultation as well. We've also done we've also done inequalities impact assessment as well. So I think from that point of view, we're making sure that everybody's got the opportunity and we're not missing out anybody. So I think the needs analysis and the equalities impact assessment, I think, were deficiencies last time. We want to make sure we don't make those same mistakes again. And that's also thank you for your time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Comprehensive view. So bearing in mind, we're going to note the action being undertaken and approve the date. I'd like to invite members, if you have any questions. Councillor Wood, I'll take them in threes. Councillor Wood, Councillor Brame, and then Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Chair. I've got some concerns with regard to Ridgeway Library. I represent Clawton Ward, and the community library at Ridgeway has been closed since...
Say
again?
I did hear what you said, sorry. Councillor
Wood.
From
Clawton Ward.
Oh, of course,
Clawton
yeah.
Ward. So specifically, community libraries in general, but with Ridgeway, it's been closed for such a long period. The community has lost a resource that they valuably needed. They also lost their community centre when the buildings took place, so they've had no focus, nowhere to go to. And I just wonder how consultation and communication is best done when a resource is closed and no one knows in that community when it will be reopened.
Just sort of separate to the actual consultation is something that we are working on the Ridgeway Library to actually reopen it again in some, in some format. We're working with facilities management that's identified to use the area for this office space, but also we will then want to make sure there's a public library in there. So we're actually working on that, and we're working that up, finding a space to it, because I know it's been closed for 2 years, longer than that, isn't it, 3 years now. So so obviously that will come out from the consultation, but also as a separate strand as well, we realised obviously we need to remobilise that library, and we're working on that sort of separate to the consultation as well.
Thank you for that. Then I'd like a little bit more detail as to how, if the timescales are that consultation will start on the 28th of June and it's for 6 to 8 weeks. What is the timescale with regard to Ridgeway being open, or the communication taking place with the community that would use that facility?
Can you take that? Sorry.
Chair, if I can come in. The issue about consultation is one that we've kind of grappled with, particularly at the minute with COVID. Peter alluded to the fact in his presentation that whilst this will be online, we will be looking to do something at every single library site in some kind of physical format, I suppose, or where we can link with some of the resources that we do have in the form of things like community connectors and people who go knocking door to door. We would welcome any sort of local ward member input on how best to do that as well, and any channels you have that we could work through. We haven't closed our mind to anything on this in terms of how we do this. Clearly online is the safest and the easiest option as things stand, and that's been the sort of format for a lot of recent consultations. But as we move through this, it doesn't start until the end of June, and then we've got 6 to 8 weeks. So anything we can do now to help locally position that consultation, we are up for doing.
Councillor Wood, with regard to the specifics of Ridgeway, if we can take that offline and come back to you with a timeline, working with our assets team on the work that's required and the timescales for opening, if that's okay.
I would really appreciate that, thank you. And if it can help or facilitate it in order to make sure that there is a facility that the community within the Noctorum area can actually access. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As I understand it, the recommendation is that the public consultation will start on the 28th of June, with a final report coming back to this committee on the 17th of November. But is there a specific date by which time the consultation must end? I think I've heard the phrase used 6 to 8 weeks, but I think I think we need to be clear exactly how long the public have got to get their comments in. So is there a specific date, please? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. I don't understand it's hard under current circumstances, but if you could narrow it down, thanks.
Do you want me to take that? Yeah, I mean, obviously we're working back from that date. We obviously want to make the sufficient time to ensure that obviously all the data is collected, the reports that worked on to make sure it's a comprehensive report. Initially, it was going to be a shorter time than that, so we sort of think that 8 weeks will, that's when we sort of start wanting to work on the report. But obviously, we could open it and we can refine it as we're going along, really. So we're not, we'll obviously have to look at that and take advice from colleagues on how we would do that. So,
thank you, Chair. I'll just reiterate, the consultation is really key to this, and we've spoken to DCMS as the governing body, and on their advice, it was recommended, we did have a previous sort of time scale. They recommended we extend that because that's the route that other local authorities have taken in terms of giving themselves plenty of time to make sure they can reach as many stakeholders, as many people within the neighbourhoods and constituencies as they can. So for me personally, I would prefer the consultation to be as long as we can make it. If we wanted to come back with a report in November, I think 8 weeks would be adequate. I'm happy to take members' views on whether they think that is long enough. We are aware that there are other authorities who've been through a similar process who have taken as long as 6 months, albeit their demographics are different, and in some cases they were county councils, so you've got lots of very small, rural, sort of, out of the way type places. But certainly if any of the members think that this consultation isn't long enough, we can certainly factor that into our plans. It just means it might come to a later committee. But I would re-emphasise the fact that this is something that we cannot get wrong this time. And it's certainly not the intention of any of my team to kind of take any shortcuts or not get the outcomes that are needed from this piece of work.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. If I can just come back. Thanks for the responses there. I understand it'd be difficult tonight to give a specific date for the end of the consultation, but what I wouldn't want to happen is for the public to be told it starts on the 28th of June, and then perhaps for people to put in comments at a later stage to be told, sorry, the consultation ended yesterday. So I think as the consultation goes on, I think at some stage it would be helpful if the public were advised of a final date by which they need to get the comments in, so at least they would know and they're not going to miss that deadline.
Thank you. So really key the messaging is really what you're concerned about. Yeah. Could you respond, please?
Can I come in there? Yes, I mean, yes, Councillor Kenny, and that we'd obviously have to make that explicit. We can't keep it open-ended and then be challenged back from it. So we would say that, we'd make it quite clear at that particular end date, what we would obviously was wanted by that date, but obviously then it can be refined after that. But it would be very explicit in the comms plan that we do, definitely. Thanks, Councillor Kenny. Thank
you. Councillor Brain?
Thank you, Chair. And can I thank you, Peter, for that very comprehensive report. It's reassuring to hear that the consultation has really been taken seriously, and I'm sure members can assist through their own channels in trying to engage residents in that consultation. It's so important that we find out what people want, not imagine we know best and tell them what they want. So we've got to get that right. The question I really had, though, was on point 4 about the financial implications. I see in the table here that we're expected to make a saving, perhaps of £100,000 annually going forward. Now, I presume that must be entirely speculative at the moment, because obviously we don't know till we've gone through the consultation process what shape the library service is going to take, where it's going to be located, what buildings are going to be used. So I just wonder, has that number just been plucked out of the air, or what is it actually based on?
Thank you, Councillor Brain. Are you happy to take that? Or yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Brain. So you're right in the sense of at no point are we looking to predetermine the outcome of this piece of work. The figures are, I wouldn't say speculative. I think they are represent an ambition as to, recognising that we have to make a contribution to the Council's medium-term financial plan across all our services. However, there is scope within those figures to fluctuate year on year, depending on what the outcome of the piece of work is. So if we were to, part of this is about opportunities for co-location with partner organisations. If we were to move our library offer into a partner organisation in an area and some savings come from that, then that might be reflected in the figures. They may go up or down. Likewise, Peter's been talking today with a pharmacy in Eastham. They've been out on site and had a visit who wished to move into the library. But I can see very early sort of conversations. So, but that's another opportunity for people to move into our estate and consequently pay some element of rent. So I said, what I said earlier is we're not ruling anything in or out, and those figures could be higher than £100,000 a year, or they could move across years. So we could have 150 in year one and 50 in year two, or like we're just not. We have to put something in to make sure that part of our ambition is to recognise that this piece of work is also contributing to that financial plan.
Thank you. I'm happy to take the next 3 if there's questions that haven't been answered. So Steve, Councillor Spriggs, Councillor Cleary. Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points. The library strategy mentions reducing inequalities in the library. Can it be expanded on what these inequalities are, please?
Yeah, I'll come in there. What was particularly interesting, I think, is around digital. I think what was really useful, something I was working on yesterday, where we looked at our e-book offer, and we assumed, everybody can actually access our e-books. We did a piece of work, and we actually realised that. We realised that there are residents in particular parts of the borough who haven't actually got access to the devices, or if they have access to those devices, they can't afford the data. So we are looking at that. We're putting in a bid at the moment with Arts Council for Libraries Improvement Fund, and I think that's where we sort of think about digital is the way forward, but we obviously want to make sure that everybody has access to those. In the libraries, what we can actually do is we can offer free access to our Wi-Fi. We need those facilities though, so we want to make sure the people who can actually, who may have the device but can't afford them, have the opportunity to come into the library. So we are addressing a digital divide there. And that's one particular one that we're particularly keen to address, Councillor Williams.
Second point sort of leads on from that about the digital. Andrew mentioned about the safest and easiest residents. Obviously, the consultation will be online, but we normally find that a lot of the library users are library users because they're not online. So I hope that's going to be considered, that quite a large majority probably won't be online.
Yeah, Councillor Williams, I fully appreciate that point. I don't know if Peter mentioned we will be doing paper copies will be available, and as I said earlier, there's probably a job for us to understand how we get those out to people, or how at least we make them accessible, and any other ways in which we can get that feedback into the consultation, because it is really important that we do, touch as many people as we can with this.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
Not next. Thank you very much. Cheers. Thank you, Chair. So thank you very much for the presentation, Peter. I think the last time I saw you, we were having a wonderful visit round the Story House when I was Cabinet Member for Culture with some other officers, and obviously what an utterly inspirational day we had there. So I think it's great that the officers are talking about co-design and co-delivery, and I think in terms of an effective consultation, creativity is the key, and it's great to hear all the different angles that you are taking, but I think some creative ideas about how we're going to engage with communities is really great. In terms of digital inequality, I mean, it's very well documented that there is massive digital inequality in this country, so it's great that you're taking that on board. I'm really pleased to hear that you say that. I think it's great to hear some of the examples you've given it. I think there might be a thematic approach, which I think you've probably already been taking, whereby there are different library models around the country who are doing great work in different areas. So there's places where that are doing great stuff around digital. There are great examples of areas that are doing great work around empowering disengaged communities, disadvantaged communities as well. And all that is part and parcel of this, isn't it, really? Because as councillors have said, it's absolutely crucial that we get this right. As we know, during lockdown, the increase in terms of digital and online use of libraries has gone up massively. I think it's over 30%. So people are desperately wanting to be able to have access to what libraries can offer in the 21st century. So that's exciting. My question is, you talked about having an excellent meeting with the Arts Council, and I'm really delighted to hear that you had that today, Peter. I wondered whether it was with Clancy Mason, the libraries officer, who's fantastic. I've met her before. It would be great to have a bit more detail about what was discussed in that, because I think it's absolutely key that the Arts Council see us working in that positive way, because I know that was one of the issues that Arts Council have been upset about for a long time, and hopefully we can put those things to one side now and look ahead. But yeah, if you could tell us a bit more about that, that'd be useful.
Yeah,
Thanks.
of course. I think there were two elements to it. One obviously was absolutely just to a bit of a check really on what we were doing in the strategy, whether they saw it was right. And I said I got some really positive feedback from it, so that was really an endorsement really, I think, that was really encouraging. Obviously also the other element was around, there's funding, there's Libraries Improvement Fund, so we actually raised that with them. I mentioned digital before, and that's something that we are looking at around, and obviously addressing that digital exclusion. So I think that what we've got planned would be really useful. We're actually looking potentially at making tablets available for the public, which is some authorities have done. I don't want to hold up Northamptonshire as an ideal council, but from a library service, that's something that they did, and we obviously are looking around what other authorities have done. I think that's one thing I've sort of found from working in this way. We're actually speaking more to colleagues, obviously on the culture side, colleagues in Holton, we're speaking to them because they're very good, and we are looking for best practice from other authorities. I think sometimes in the past we thought this is the way we'll do it, but there's some great examples going on there, and I don't know if anybody heard, I said that I referred to a Universal Offers seminar yesterday, so there was some really good practice going on across the country, so we're keen to look at those opportunities. We just need to have our facilities in place, and obviously get engagement from all our residents. So there's some really good work going on there in the profession, and we don't want to miss out on that.
Just wanted to quickly come back and say two things. I did notice that recently Liverpool City Council are just starting to talk about bringing their one-stop shops back into libraries, which is quite a neat idea. And secondly, I should just declare that I should have declared this before. I didn't realise that making the connections now. I actually am a member of the board of Get It Loud in Libraries, which obviously puts on fantastic gigs in libraries in Birkenhead and promote those gigs widely. And I think there's a real opportunity for you to do some direct consultation with an amazing audience, a different audience that comes into your libraries around that whole tourism offer as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spriggs. That's just a personal interest you're declaring. Yes, I thought so. And naturally, I think exemplars from around the country and all the research you're doing is fabulous, but the consultation comes before all of that. We're not doing any copy versions of anywhere. We're absolutely listening to the public and then deciding the way forward. So then just to come back to Councillor Cleary, I'm sorry, I did have you as next, but are you happy to ask your question now?
I am indeed. Thanks very much, Chair.
To come back on what I said, what I asked.
On the examples from around the country that you've looked at?
It was just to sort of embellish something Peter said around Councillor Spriggs's point. When we spoke to DCMS, the three words that stuck in my head from the conversation were that our library service needs to be comprehensive, efficient and accessible. I'd probably have had a fourth word to that. For me, another one would be ambitious. So when we talk about, one-stop shop services, we are in conversation with our digital teams and those people who are looking forward in terms of what will we be providing as a digital offer council-wide. So there is scope now for virtual one-stop shops. So we are looking at them as options. So it's not necessarily about the physical aspect of a one-stop shop. It's can you access those services that you could do in a one-stop shop as well. That's also, we're looking to form that as part of the offer as well. So we are quite ambitious in all this.
Thank you. And I understand we already have a one-stop shop in Heswell Library. That's already a merged model. So we've got experience in that as well. Thank you. Councillor Cleary, thanks.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And I suppose just on that, we are developing our community bank as well, which there might be synergies there with our library offer going forward, just to mention that. I just had a few questions about the consultation, if I may. I would add my support if it's a choice between 6 and 8 weeks. I'd prefer 8 weeks. It sounds like that's manageable from what officers are saying. So given the time of year and some of the other issues that have been already raised, let's have longer rather than shorter, please. Just interested in the way we're framing some of the issues that we're consulting the public on, which I think is really important. Excuse me if, as a new member to the committee, I'm sure the committee has looked at this in much more detail in the past, but the report we're given today gives a very brief outline as to why the as-is model can't continue. It says many libraries are underused, staffing is stretched, there is a shortage of funding for books, IT facilities and building maintenance and modernisation. I'd just like some reassurance that the public, when they look at the consultation, are going to get a good explanation as to why we're consulting with them. I'm wondering if that's been thought about in detail, and if you could say a bit more about that and explaining to the public exactly why we're doing this, and will the financial figures that are in our report in Table 1, will they actually be presented as part of the consultation? And similarly, my second question really is around, the sensitivities about discussing moving libraries. You talk about the central library and the possibilities around that, and I appreciate there's a lot of ambition, which is really great to see, but it's a sensitive area as well. So could you talk a little bit about how we're actually framing that in terms of what we're presenting to the public?
Yeah, I'll take that. I think the first point on that is really, as I sort of said in the presentation, we're looking at modernised library services. This is what we want to do. It's, there's a lot of aspirations in there. Obviously, I referred to the central libraries in obviously Liverpool and Chester. We want to try and sort of replicate something like that. And I think the point I'm making here is this is consultation. We want the views. We're not predicating on anything. We want views from our public, and we're receptive to those views. We're not talking, and I know from back in 2009 what a sensitive issue it can be for moving libraries. I think what's really important is that we haven't used that word that begins with C. We never use that disclosure. We're not doing, we're not looking at that. We are looking at obviously probably co-location if that's what our communities want. If they don't, we will obviously then have to look at how we sort of take that forward really. So. So to answer the question there, we sort of see it as an opportunity here. We're not actually looking at financial savings based from this. Some may come, as Andy's actually sort of said, but I sort of see it as a real opportunity, a really exciting time, really, to be honest with you.
Did you want to come in as well?
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Cleary. In terms of narrative, yes, there'd definitely be some wraparound narrative to this to provide a level of context as to why we're doing this and what we would like people's role to be in this and link to some of those outcomes. It's always a slightly fine balance between too much and too little because we're doing our best not to try and predetermine or influence, any of the responses. And, linked to that, we wouldn't be putting any financial figures in the consultation because I'm not sure it's probably appropriate for what we're trying to achieve. As I sort of alluded to earlier, these are kind of internal figures whereby there is an element of recognition that this could lead to this could support the medium and long-term financial plan, although how it would, we don't actually know yet.
Any more questions or comments? Councillor Phil Gilchrist and Councillor Booth.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Mr McCartan mentioned the issue of efficient and comprehensive, because that comes from the 1964 Libraries Act, which has ingrained in my memory. I think as one of the members that actually gave evidence to the Charterist inquiry all those years ago, the issue of how to tackle things is not only, I probably have the scars as well, because I can remember just how many hours I spent over those months working with the local communities to try and reach a solution to the issues that we were presented with. I think at the moment, though, to be positive, I'm meeting elderly people who have been buying books and sharing them amongst themselves and passing them round. Meeting people who are itching to get back into their local library because Eastham has been used as a testing centre and Brom has been closed all the time. So I'm looking forward to the day when we can have the go-ahead on health grounds and alterations and airflow and safety grounds to getting the buildings open. In terms of questionnaires, yes, I have to say that local chemists is one of the places I thought of where if the library may not be available, questionnaires might be deposited with some places by arrangement because they're obviously places people go to. Sadly, they may go if they're not well, but they're obviously well attended. This sense of isolation that people have had and the impact on their mental health of isolation is something that our library service can help undo and combat. So I just want to ask about the links to the exercise. If those could be sent to members of the committee as soon as possible, we can start the process. 8 weeks would take us sometime to the sort of August bank holiday period, probably, in which case we need to factor that into calculations that we make. One issue about the development of community managed libraries occurs to me is that you've mentioned that officers have been talking to friends groups. Of course, it's been very difficult for any groups of any sort to meet in person over the last year. So there are some areas that had friends groups that were thriving, others that were developing, and others that hadn't got started yet. And I don't know quite what the position is for each of those groups, but if we can help them get going, if the buildings are open, often we are offering them facilities to meet because they're the people who are going to bring forward friends and bring people into the library who may, at some future date, play a part in community management. But for all groups, and it's going to be difficult to get going after a year of not going, putting it simply. So the ability of people, or the willingness perhaps to meet, may have been affected. And so that's something I hope has been factored into our assessment. So I think most people will be desperate to get back in their libraries, anxious to see if the things they valued are still there, and perhaps with the the range of books that are still available and other materials. In terms of one-stop shops, I'm still convinced, though, that our library service can't just rely on electronic portals, or whatever you want to call them, video links. There will be people who will want to see face-to-face, person-to-person contact, and perhaps we need a rota, as I've said elsewhere, of staff that can come out from the council's finance and other services to go and be in libraries by appointment and to guarantee to be there to reach the people that we can't always reach. So in general, I'm looking forward to the consultation. I believe people will be itching to take part in it because it's important that they shape the future of our services. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to echo a lot of what you said. I don't like these themed weeks, but it is National Loneliness Week, and all that does is raise awareness, and so we're all cognizant of that. Thank you. Is there anything you wanted to respond on?
I'll take that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I can show you Councillor Gilchrist for Eastham. I was actually in there at this lunchtime, so it's actually, you know, getting back to look like a library again, which is really encouraging. So getting new carpet put in there. Obviously, just on the remobilisation, which is another issue, we have got plans, you know, and phases, and obviously the next libraries will be easier to open. As you alluded to, then the ventilation. The fact, obviously, that Eastham was a testing centre. We know that's been checked. So there is something coming out fairly soon about Eastham. So. That was really good. I think you also mentioned about friends groups, and yeah, it's always been very difficult to speak to friends groups. I did sort of set up a friends forum back in the day. Unfortunately, that sort of lost its impetus because no one was prepared to sort of chair it going forward. But we're still having very positive conversations with individual friends groups. And we've had offers of help from them as well. So that conversation is still going on. And I was just speaking to my colleague, Mr. Mackenzie, just before. I'm looking to try and actually do a consultation with friends in this room in a few weeks' time. So those conversations are going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Booth? Yes, I'll come back. Once. I just already took the name down, sorry. Councillor Booth. Councillor Wood.
Thank you. With the timeline on those dates, it's just the report and the recommendations that were put forward would have been pre the announcements that were made on Monday. So what considerations have there been put in place with regard to the fact that the date has now moved from the 21st of June to the 19th of July?
Do you want me to say that? To be honest with you, we looked at it online. I think we're looking around the remobilisation and the plans and the consultation. We are planning, and we're carrying on as we were, really, to be honest with you, because obviously we're not going to we didn't know how many libraries will be open by the 21st of June or the 19th of July. To be honest, in a sense, we'd have to deal with whatever date it was. And as I said around the consultation, we want to make sure there's paper copies there in the communities. We wouldn't have had 24 libraries open on the 21st of June. We're not going to have 24 libraries open on the 19th of July. So in a way, we're doing our planning back to that report date of the 17th of November. Yes, it is difficult to do it, obviously, while we're in this situation. And I think what's more concerning is the fact that it's making sure people are, who aren't going out, who are still scared to go out in the community, aren't being disenfranchised. So I think that's something I was sort of saying today, really, where from using our library services, people aren't coming back in the same way because there is still that reticence to come back in. We want to make sure that we have every opportunity and would welcome advice on how to do that during a pandemic. It is quite difficult, but we are doing the best we can on that. Thank you.
Does that mean then it will be a later date rather than the 28th, or will it still go ahead as the 28th?
No, still go ahead.
I think the restrictions don't apply as strongly to the library sector as they do to other sectors. Do we need to take advice? Are you happy to give us some advice?
Well, I think we've been working closely with Peter and the team all the way through, so we'll just continue to update the advice as things change.
Thank you. Councillor Booth, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just before we begin, as the committee involving culture, I think it would only be right if we congratulate the England team for their win on Sunday. Avenged our loss from Russia a couple of years ago. This is more of a proposal rather than a question. So I'll just show members this as an example. So this is a book relating to our pictures of Wallasey, as one example, by a local author. I met him the other day, and he did an exhibition recently in New Brighton, just around the corner, which pulled in around 2,500 people over a month's period. Now, the proposal is to get these exhibitions into libraries, and I'm not sure if you've had the conversations, Peter, but if I could just mention a few things. The author's Richard Jackson, and he's done a few books here. If members want to have a look, feel free to come over after the meeting. But he produces a wide range of history books utilising resources and pictures from the Wirral archives. So it's all local and relates to all libraries and what they offer currently. With 2 exhibitions already under his belt, as I mentioned, pulling in 5,000 visitors combined, if we can get those similar numbers into our libraries, engaging with these type of exhibitions, obviously that would be fantastic. Taking into account the time required to produce the books, research them, etc., there is scope for 8 exhibitions over 2 years just for this author, rotating around the libraries of Earlston, Birkenhead Central, West Kirby and Bebington. The fact that we could have a local book with local printers, local caterers within our local libraries, I think ticks all the boxes of what we're trying to get the libraries to offer back post-COVID, at a need established for residents locally and again with the council as it states in 310. This will further provide the range of services with literacy and enjoyment of reading and learning at the core, getting the biggest impact possible. Local schools can come in, local history talks, all these events revolving around the exhibitions. I think they'll be fantastic with a range of services. I'd also just like to point out at 311, it outlines that the key aim is to raise the profile and service offer from the library's provision. I think just on that wording, it should be reevaluated and instead focus on the need to change the profile of the library, because obviously they've been around for a long time, libraries, and the one good thing about COVID and the pandemic is we can start afresh with many things. And I think starting afresh with libraries, providing new services, it should be looked at in that way rather than raising the profile, if that makes sense. So yeah, the exhibition strategy, I think, is a new way to bring revival to our libraries locally, going forward, providing local need and service, involving local businesses, publishers and providers, and providing the added bonus of increased revenue streams and footfall for our libraries. So I was hoping you could take into account that there's people willing to come on board with these exhibitions, get into the libraries and help with the revival. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. We won't take that as a formal proposal, but it is definitely a great suggestion, and all the key people are in this room who've heard you speak brilliantly about it. Peter is obviously happy to respond to you.
Yep. Yeah, I know Richard, and actually I was involved with him in the early stages when he's looking to get the photos together. So, I mean, that's something that we would be really keen to do. Obviously, when the restrictions have been lifted, exhibitions in the libraries, touring exhibitions is something that we're really keen on. It fits in exactly with Strategic Priority 3 on culture and creativity. So I know Richard, I've worked with Richard, so he can contact me anytime. And that's something we'd be really keen to do, I can assure you on that one.
Yeah, if I can just... Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for that suggestion. I think both for libraries and other elements of the estate, of which most of it sits within this committee and this portfolio within neighbourhoods. One of the things we often talked about is maximisation and utilisation of space and flexibility of that space. So we're here now, this is traditionally perceived as a theatre. It's become lots of things during COVID. We've got museums, so in terms of exhibitions, that presents opportunities, and likewise, the more we can stimulate and generate activity and collaboration in any element of our estate, the more valuable it becomes and the more value it adds for residents. So I would certainly welcome any suggestions. And Peter and the teams did a lot pre-COVID. I think you're right. There's a kind of semi-reset button here, and we can look at how we do things differently. Some of the emerging things around collaboration space, We've spoken to the Chamber of Commerce about, one of the things that's emerged during COVID is small makers, so people who are making jewellery and small items and things like that. Could we do those kind of, they exhibit in some of our bigger libraries or some of our bigger spaces even. So I think there's definitely an element here of the art of the possible basically sits with us now and what we choose to do with it.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just obviously highlight, as I've just had an hour and a half meeting with staff over heritage issues this afternoon, just to make obviously new members aware that the Wirral, from a point of view of heritage promotion, is pioneers basically in the northwest of England. It is seen as a pioneering authority, and the reason why it's a pioneering authority is the 60 heritage groups on the Wirral formed into the Wirral History and Heritage Association, and also we then have Conservation Areas Wirral representing all the groups on Wirral. They all came together to what we knew awkward times were ahead about 10, 15 years ago from a point of view of funding, and this partnership has set Wirral to a new level in relation to new initiatives, particularly from a point of view of the heritage groups and the conservation groups absolutely participating with the council at all levels. And I can tell you now, we're in one of the best positions we have ever been in. I mean, we've got 25 major items on the go at the moment from a heritage point of view. Obviously, this will be dealt with later in relation to the Heritage Champion. But we're in a circumstance now where heritage is about heritage and tourism
Jerry,
and culture.
Sorry to interrupt. Do we want to come to the proper point of the meeting for heritage? Because I understand you're passionate about it.
Yeah. What I would say is just read the report is there that in relation to the sheer amount of work that is going on engaging heritage groups and organisations on the Wirral at this moment of time. And do they engage? They certainly do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think that finishes the debate and the questions. I'll just reiterate the recommendation. The Tourism, Communities, Culture and Leisure Committee is requested to note the action being taken to deliver the public consultation on the draft library strategy and propose the new model and approve the proposed date of June the 28th, 2021 for the start of the public consultation. And the second part of the recommendation is to approve the proposed date for the Director to bring a report to Tourism, Communities, Culture and Leisure Committee, 17th of November 2021, to present a final library strategy with recommendations and all the accompanying findings and outcomes from the public consultation. Are we happy to agree that by assent? Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, so the next element on our agenda is number 7, income generation opportunities relating to the future operation of the Floral Pavilion Theatre, which we're currently in, and the conference centre, which we're currently using, the aspect of. I'd like to invite David Mackenzie to present the report, and we obviously have other officers in attendance. Thank you.
Evening, everybody. This report provides an update on the operation and future plans of the Floral Pavilion Theatre and Conference Centre. Members will be aware that at the theatre, the Floral has been subject to some of the most restrictive regulations, which has prevented the hosting of live performances for over 15 months. The venue has, however, been open as a successful catering facility during relaxations of COVID rules, both this year and last year. Its value as a key strategic asset has played a key part of our COVID response, hosting one of our busiest testing centres and providing access to over 13,000 public toilet users during the busy summer periods in 2020 and 2021. The successful insourcing of the hospitality service has enabled a rethink of how the council now delivers catering and hospitality across all its estate and during COVID. Officers have been working on innovative ideas to provide a future commercial-driven model for high-footfall sites such as leisure centres, the Williamson Art Gallery and the new Water Sports Centre Bistro Cafe at West Kirby. Enabling the vision of locally sourced produce, the hospitality procurement team have jointly worked hard to ensure supply chains are local, making use of locally sourced produce. Joint working can also be seen in the creating of the 4 apprenticeships that apply to the work, supporting the council's apprenticeship and care leavers teams in meeting the aims. Hopefully the report does highlight the joint working across the departments, the Floral Pavilion and committee services as an example here, the sail loft in West Kirby, the sailing centre and leisure services. The generation of growth of income is also a point I'd like to highlight in the report, as well as the increased social value such as supporting people into work and healthy eating. Overall, the reputation values of the council and also their council assets is something we're also looking to enhance as well. This report, the report recommendations are for the committee to, note the contents of the report and support the development, implementation of future, medium and long-term income proposals set out in this report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I'm happy to take them in threes again. Councillor Johnson, Councillor Brame. Thank you.
Thank you for the report, and obviously we've had further meetings about this as well, relating particularly to West Kirby Sale. Very interested about the apprenticeship and care leavers option of engaging with those, and I'm really wanting us to ensure that we engage with local young people, which is something specifically that the councillors have been asking for, I know, in the ward in West Kirby and Thurston, Hoylake and Mells. So we would encourage you, please, to engage with the local schools, so West Kirby Grammar, Caldy Grammar and Tilbury, with a view to trying to engage and get local employment so people can walk to work ideally. And I'm also very conscious there will be a flexible workforce involved in this, so we will need a rota, and it won't just be obviously people who are employed, it's likely to be people who are needed on a peripatetic basis as well. And the second point, Chair, if I may please, thank you, is again relating to Sale Loft Coastal Kitchen. It's actually spelt incorrectly in this document. The coastal has to be right. In relation to that particularly, I want more information about the financials. So you put a figure in there of 0.08 million, for instance, in 4.5. I'd like to know what kind of income you're projecting for the different parts of your offering here, what profits you're expecting from the different entities, and what success will look like. I think it's very important that we get performance management frameworks in place, and we would know whether we felt that things were going really well and were successful or not. Unless we do that, it's very hard. So I think the financial, but also the wider performance management parameters are important. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of the apprenticeships is run by the 419 team, so I will liaise with them in terms of the local schools and where we can seek apprenticeships from in there. In terms of the local employment, again, we do have some posts vacant still, so taking some points, we will look at advertising more locally in the area with the remaining posts we do. I'm going to seek some advice about how we can, or if we can look at employing people in the local area, because it was my current knowledge that we don't see where people are from when we're interviewing people. So I'm not sure how we could guarantee the employment of people for West Kirby, for example, in the recruitment process at this time. But I will ask HR for some help and confirmation on that. In terms of the sale loft, more financial detail. So income projected is £662,924.70p. The profit of that is £107,038.14. In terms of success, that's a 17% profit ratio. So we would keep tabs on that. So obviously as trade fluctuated, we could potentially reduce staffing, for example, or increase staffing if needed. And obviously with the cost of produce, if you don't buy it, obviously you don't incur the cost. So that's why we use the percentage to monitor our success. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just come back on that, please? Thank you. Specifically relating to where they're from, you can ask HR, please. I'd request, please, that you ask HR to put that on the application so you've got the awareness of where they're from. We're very interested in the green agenda and sustainability, so if young people can walk to work, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. Would Andy McCartney would like to answer as well.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Johnson, for all those points. And it's certainly something we'll take on board around performance management frameworks, and we are aiming high with this, and again, I'll go back to that word ambition. We have been very ambitious with this. Dave has worked really hard with the 14 to 19 team and HR to try and get this ambitious apprentice and care leaver programme in to both of these sites. Sometimes that can be challenging, and having been involved with successful care leaver projects in the past, they are exceptionally rewarding when they do come off. And it's something we intend to do, but Dave has had to actually try to create a pathway. So one of the things he was keen to do from day one was not just to bring people in for a set period and then see them disappear off. People who've got a real ambition to stay within the catering industry and hopefully can come in somewhere near the bottom, but then work their way up to and diversify into being a chef or one of the big London hotels. It's kind of the opportunities are endless, but I do know it's something that David's been really passionate about. But we do take on board that it would be great to have local people affiliated to those local sites where we've got them as well. So thank you for those comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to add, that's something that we haven't stated in the report due to timelines, is that we are working with Wirral Met to provide the qualification for apprentices. It'll be an MVQ in hospitality that apprentices will achieve. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Brain.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this is a new initiative which we're hoping to develop and expand, and in some ways it's been launched at a very, very difficult time where we're in the middle of, or hopefully coming towards the end of a COVID pandemic. But I wonder, David, if you could give us some indication of how profitable the operation here has been. Obviously, it's not typical circumstances, but it'd be useful to hear about that. And then my second question, again, is with my ward councillor hat on. I say one of the areas that we're looking to develop is the Williamson in Oxton. Now, I know the cafe there has been open. I've had a cake and a drink there myself last week. But the offer was extremely limited. And I just wonder how viable that is going to be when at the moment it's only open a few afternoons a week. And there's such a sort of little affair on offer for people. How do you see that developing?
Could I just, obviously officers are happy to answer your questions, it's just that later on I was going to suggest we put the Williamson on the work programme for a whole host of reasons, and that's partly because of obviously all the conversations we had in previous committee, but yes, officers can answer those immediate questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. So here at the Floral Pavilion, during July to December, when we could open for the Out to Help scheme, our income was £109,000. Profitability of that, we were receiving about 72% GP over that period. A little bit, I can't tell you what that is with the cost of service, because we used Floral Pavilion staff to help deliver that at the time, instead of some alternative options that we've used in the past. So I can say it's profitable. I can't give you an exact figure here at the moment, I'm afraid. In terms of the Williamson Art Gallery, the little offer, we were asked to help the Williamson make sure to be open to provide a service rather than nothing at all. I think was the option there. So over the COVID pandemic, it's very difficult with the size of room to get a sizable return on the service, if that makes sense. In terms of the future is very much certainly to help develop that and work with the Williamson and work with the service providers. So the Sale Loft is a great example of how we've, and as I've mentioned, that joint working across departments, how we've worked with leisure services to see what their offer is, to understand what their offer is and what their want is and what their audience is, and how we can enhance that asset with hospitality services. And we need to do that same process with the Williamson. We need to sit down with the Williamson, we need to understand their offer, we need to understand their demographic, their market, the times of opening, what their aspirations are to do that. And only then will we know if that is in terms of financially sustainable or not, or what the value of that service is.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Braham. I'm pleased to see you've been to the Williamson, had a coffee and a tea. So it's, yeah, the hours at the minute are restricted and are kind of temporary during, you know, particularly during this period. And there is still some work to be done on some of the ventilation elements within the building. So Joe and the team have taken, as you know, a very cautious approach to reopening. They will change as we move forward, but, you know, again, we've seen this week, we're kind of in and out of, you know, restrictions, and that will prompt I suspect, a corporate view on how quickly we move on some of these things, given there may be some additional demands on us as a council. So, you know, we've already got some of our library staff still engaged in COVID responses. Some of the Williamson staff were. We'll just continue to monitor the corporate approach and look at, you know, what, where and when we open the Williamson in line with some of those constraints and in line with the works that need doing in the building. But going forward, I see it as another venue with real potential. You know, it was the first time I'd seen the outdoor walled garden a few weeks ago when I went to visit before they opened. And, you know, Dave and I and Joe have spoken about, again, what is, you know, the art of the possible there in terms of not just the cafe, but those things like small exhibitions, small boutique type weddings. You know, Joe has just secured some funding for a load more outdoor furniture so we can kind of enhance. Again, this is about our trying to put a safe offer first. So if we can get people into the cafe but seat them outside, that's another offer we can have that people will feel safer with. But, you know, just be assured it's very much in our forward thinking in terms of what we do, and I'm happy for it to go on any future work programme because I'd welcome that input.
Yeah, thank you. We'll come on to the work programme. It was just, obviously, with the soft opening and then the reduced hours, some of the user groups who also rely on funding are slightly compromised at the moment. So if it comes onto the work programme, we can definitely explore everything from the original budget proposal through to some of the plans. Thank you. The recommendation is actually on pages... Oh, sorry, Councillor Spriggs.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to raise a couple of things. It is great to sort of see that there's more joined up thinking going on around income generation, and just even some of the last things that have been getting said about the Williamson. I mean, I know the Williamson quite well, so that's good. I was even thinking if with a bit of imagination, you could actually have an outdoor area at the front of the building where all the grassed area is. If you had a bit of concealed something or other from the traffic. I think one of the things that's interesting about the training offer, because that could be something that could really get developed around catering all these venues, is there is going to be a massive there already is a massive shortage in terms of hospitality, and we know obviously Liverpool City region, one of the main areas of economic generation is hospitality and tourism. So with some clever thinking, there could be some real kind of paving of training up young people, almost using these venues as training spaces as well as them working. And then never mind going to London, you know, they offer. They're crying out. They're going to be crying out for help in the in Liverpool City. They're already very concerned about that shortage of staffing. And I think one of the things we've really got to remember is we are in arts and cultural spaces, and I don't want us to only think about, you know, the cake and coffee option. You know, we've got to start thinking longer term about, you know, how we're going to start having these spaces operating again, bringing in people to enjoy and participate in arts and culture and creativity. So hopefully, you know, there'll be a report coming soon, and good to hear, Chair, that it's going to be the Williamsons going on to the work plan. But similarly, the Floral Pavilion and what happens with the Floral in terms of the theatre offer and the conferencing offer is something I'm also very concerned about. Thank you.
Did you want any questions, or was it just a comment?
If anyone wants to come back.
Thank you. I think we're happy to move on to the recommendation. It's on page 31 and 32.
No, I was going to speak.
I'm sorry, Jerry, I'm not being able to see people's hands
It's only
properly.
a very quick
Sorry.
one, don't worry, I'm not going to keep you all night. No, it's, just a comment. I mean, I very much appreciate over the Williamson, it's a delicate period of time and temporary opening hours, but and I know the testing systems and new working practices, and there's a whole number of things going on at the moment, and obviously talking to staff down there. But I will emphasise, bearing in mind we do know the tourism, situation is going to explode. I think it's very, very important that we're very much in gear as soon as possible. And as you say, we know the Williamson is one of the jewels of our crown. Sorry to come out with that boring phrase, but it certainly is. And, it's not only important as I say, from a cultural and tourism heritage point of view, it's very important from an educational point of view, and I've seen it too many times going in there, the really excellent work that's happening down there. So I would emphasise speed now to move things forward, and I know the difficulties that you're taking on, and I fully appreciate that, but that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? Okay. Can we move on to the recommendation? Page 31 and 32. It's to note the contents of the report and support the development and implementation of future, medium and long-term income proposals set out in this report. Is everybody happy to agree that by assent? Thank you. That brings us on to item 8, pages 39 to 52. And I'd like to invite Andy McCartan to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. So committee will be aware that in March 2021, members were asked to consider the closure of the Europa pools, fun pool only. I'll just stress that. So this is the bit with the slides and the weighing machines. To support the Council's medium-term financial plan, and in light of the fact that it is a very difficult space to manage whilst we are still in COVID restrictions. So committee did ask that a consideration was given to keep an option to open the fun pool in the summer holiday period. That was subject to the government review of Monday the 14th of June, and as we now know, that has been delayed for another 4 weeks until the 19th of July, which would be the planned date at which the pool would likely reopen. So we're very much in a kind of fork in the road here in terms of we've already commenced some activity on what we've deemed essential engineering and works that would be needed in the event that it were to open. But I'm still mindful of both the potential impacts of COVID transmission if we did permit significant numbers to come into the space uncontrolled, and any corresponding impact on that saving within the financial plan. So the recommendations are that Tourism, Communities, Culture and Leisure Committee is requested to note the information and options in the report and make a decision based upon the information provided to support the extended closure of the leisure pool until the beginning of 2022 summer holiday period, and utilise a space within the facility for an alternative provision of sport and activity, or to instruct the Director of Neighbourhoods to undertake and facilitate the necessary steps for the reopening of the leisure pool for the 2021 school summer holiday period, the 19th of July to the 5th of September inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we start the questions, I'm delighted that Julie Webster is able to attend, because I don't want us to get into a lot of guesswork when we have expertise with us who can answer the questions. But I'll take the questions in threes again. So who would like to ask? Okay. I would like to hear some context, actually, if you're happy to let us know how you feel about the numbers involved and the worst case scenario that we have of breaking even with a reduced number. Thank you.
I can certainly talk about the current position with regard to COVID cases within the borough. I have to say that my crystal ball with regard to COVID is somewhat broken. And as you will all know, this is a virus that is just keeping us on our toes. So I was just going to talk a little bit about where we're at the moment, because I think we can only make the decision based on what we know now. Because if I'd been talking to you 2-3 weeks ago, I think I'd have been saying something quite different to you. You'll have picked up, and a number of you had a briefing this week from myself and the Chief Exec, that the North West is currently at the epicentre of an increase in COVID-19 cases driven by the new Delta variant, which is up to 60% more transmissible than the Kent variant, which is the variant that drove the increase in cases during Christmas and into the new year. I take no pleasure in saying this, but on the 13th of June, we'd seen 276 cases in the previous 7 days, which was a 59% increase on the previous 7 days. And unfortunately, this Monday, we've had 77 cases reported, which is the highest number we've had since this third phase of the pandemic has hit us. In mid-May, I would have been reporting to you that we had around 4 to 6 cases per day. And now, as I said, on Monday, we had 77. I think what we can do is look back to the 17th of May, when obviously restrictions were lifted, people started to mix more, and the variant is more transmissible. Unfortunately as well, the cases that are coming forward are in our younger age groups who aren't vaccinated yet. And just tonight, I've been informed that we've had to have a nursery closed because of an outbreak, and we've got a whole year group isolating in one of the high schools, again, because of an outbreak. So I think we're in a very difficult place with regard to the cases in the borough, and unfortunately, it's only going one way, which is an increase and a particular focus, as I said, on young people and those that aren't vaccinated. So if you're asking for me for today, my advice is we should not be opening the Europa fund pool. Particularly, I understand, and Andy and Nikki know the numbers, but the number of people that are needed to go through to actually make it financially viable would put us in a very, very difficult place. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for all the information you provided to members during the course of this pandemic. It's helped us navigate through it much better than having to listen to 17 different sources. We came to rely on some of the reports that's really informed us, but obviously we naturally still want to go to the vote. If anybody does have any more questions, or, I mean, I'd particularly like to understand what you may utilise the space for, which is possible with the current COVID limitations.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Julie. So I asked officers to have a look at what could we do, you know, in the event that we have, you know, for 15 months now we've had a space there that has been underutilised, and we know what, as I say, what the current financial position looks like. So it was about trying to generate a level of income from the space that would equally, you know, provide the people of Birkenhead with some element of additional leisure provision. In conversations with an external company and with our own direct labour force, we've been able to sort of design and build what's effectively a mezzanine floor, and anyone who knows some of the older swimming baths will know that these were quite common, that will sit into the space, because it is kind of a funny sort of shaped space, and onto which we could situate leisure equipment in terms of spinning bikes, running machines, things like that, or we could do classes, or we could do both. We could mix and match it. What it also does is frees up another bit of the Europa pools, i.e. the upstairs gym, which is very small and constrained, and that could lend itself to more sort of socially distanced weights or equipment or something else. So it's about creating an offer in that space and in the centre. The lane swimming element of the site has been open since it was permitted to be open. That's now receiving swimmers, and again, when it's safe to do so, and as we are able to increase the numbers, we can, you know, increase the numbers who are lane swimming as well. But it is a much more controlled environment in terms of People just aren't sort of running around freely. So we're kind of able to work with the restrictions on that one, but it becomes much more difficult if the fun pool opens.
Thank you. Councillor Spriggs.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Julie, for your presentation. Thank you, Andrew. Obviously, this latest information is coming to me tonight. I think it's the absolute first and foremost consideration has to be safety for our children and young people, our families. Of course, that has to be the case. I think we were very concerned, though, before we knew this information, that options A and B, myself and the team, the Labour team, were really keen that we did everything we humanly could to make this leisure pool available this summer for children and young people and families who might not get another chance to be able to enjoy, a swim, basically, and get some much needed leisure time and exercise. Having said that, obviously, we have to take very, very seriously what we are being presented with this evening. I think my one slight concern is that the current recommendations say to support the extended closure of the leisure pool until the beginning of the 2022 school summer holiday period. I wondered why it has to be the school summer holiday period in next year, whether it could not be brought forward to Easter school holidays or something. I mean, one of the things we have to try and remember is we've got to try and give people hope, that things can at some stage get back. So that was, if we do have to now take on board that this might not be able to open this summer, I just wondered why we have this, very kind of, stringent, not until the summer of 2022, and whether that could be looked at. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Spriggs. It's really down to cost. If we every time we empty and refill the pool, there's a significant cost. It's also about staffing. So if we have a absolute block of time, which historically has always been the most profitable time because it's a 6-week summer holiday period, then we can account for the cost of filling the pool versus the cost of staffing and any secondary spend that comes into the centre. So to optimise the income and to address the budget challenge, we recommended that the summer holiday period was the best time to do this. That was first and foremost the kind of rationale for the summer holidays. Now, we're kind of at the mercy of committee. If we wanted to do it Easter, we just need to be cognizant of what other costs that may incur, and we'd then be keeping staff on. We'd effectively be opening it from Easter to September, but there might be a period whereby we know it will be quiet and we'd still be paying employees, and we'd still be incurring the costs of pumping the pool, heating the pool, and those other things that go with it. So it was purely about trying to manage expectations around having the pool open and managing the budget impacts that it brings with it.
I was just, if I could, Chair, come back on that. So obviously at the spokes meeting, we looked at and obviously before we had this information, we were looking at, if we did open the pool, what would be needing to happen in terms of equipment and looking at plant and stuff like that. And that I think at that stage we were talking about the fact that there would be a cost of roughly 90,000, is that right? And that there would be a possibility of us being able to access some COVID recovery funding to make that happen. I suppose I'm just, we don't know how quickly things could turn around again, and it would just be such a shame if numbers did start to go down very, very rapidly, and because of the pre-planning in terms of this 90,000, we're not able to open the pool even if we could. So I think that is a real dilemma, and I'm not suggesting there's an answer, but I do think that was the position that we were going to be taking. We wanted everything to be done, everything possible that could be put in place, bearing in mind the safety issues, so that we could try our very best to get our kids access to Europa Fun Pool this summer. And that still remains our position, but we completely understand that this latest information does get us to have to think again a little bit on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, it is a shame, but the officers have put a large degree of effort into also making sure that that was an opportunity that they could pursue. Yes, I'm happy to take Councillor Wood, and then Councillor Johnson, then Councillor Brain, and Councillor Booth.
Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the information, Julie. It's saddening to hear just how rapidly it's taken over again. I just wanted to ask us something that you mentioned when you were talking is about the works that had been pre-done, that have happened in order for the suggested opening time. Is there a cost implication with regard to that? So at what cost is that? Is it work that is you don't lose the value of that work? And also then if it doesn't open until 2022, is there budgetary savings that can be shifted elsewhere?
Just so on the costs, we recognise that the 14th of June would have been too late to do some of the necessary works that would have been required to get it open for the 19th of July. So we, through the COVID funding mechanism, we applied for, because it is a COVID impact, we applied for approximately £90,000 worth of funding, which was the works that we knew about. The reality is until you put water in the pool, until you start the machinery up, after 15 months, we're not sure what's going to happen. So we've done a level of work that using that COVID funding, and we've had people working night shifts and things to try and get the real essential stuff done in terms of engineering. I couldn't put a value on what's been done to date here, but it's only been the minimum as what needed to be done to get us to that point. So yes, we have funding. Yes, work has been done. Some of that work could be lost. So the flumes, for instance, if we've done the work on the flumes, and I don't know if we have, they need an annual safety inspection. So we'd have to do that again next year anyway. Some of the stuff, pumps, etc., might be. It might be the case that we can just, the work that's been done on them will carry over into the next period. So it's kind of a little bit of everything.
Yeah, thank you. But at some point then, will there be a cost analysis worked out on that?
Yeah, so we're required to, all spend that's against COVID funding, we report back as part of the mobilisation process. So we will be able to establish what work's been done, what it cost and where it's been charged to. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you, Julie. I think it's very much that we're in this time of agile decision making at the moment, and it's really hard to make decisions because we also wanted that leisure pool to open. So we were all in agreement with it, I think, in this room, in that was our heart to give this to the young people of that region and our wider part of Wirral. But unfortunately, we do have to, I think, we obviously have to listen to our Director of Public Health and what Julie is suggesting to us. My only worry, residual concern, if you like, is if with A, we're assuming that everything will be absolutely fine by 22. And my goodness, we hope it is. But I do think there needs to be a caveat built into that, which might be a legal caveat, that decision as well needs to be open to review if situations change. Because this time last year, we would never have believed, I don't think, that we'd still be having such a degree of problem with the virus. So I just think perhaps even with 2A, there needs to be a caveat built into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that a proposal or just a suggestion?
It's a proposal, but the wording, I think, would have to be from the legal side, please, if possible.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you. Is that something we can just add to it before we go to?
What is being proposed is that little a, but subject to review in relation to the opening of the pool.
Thank you. Councillor Brain.
Thank you, Chair. And can I thank the officers for the tremendous efforts they have been making to get the pool ready. The idea of having the temporary gym on the mezzanine floor is obviously trying to make the best use of the facility, and I do understand that, and I think during the rest of the year it will probably be appreciated. But the fact remains is that it is not something that's going to cater for the needs of youngsters in Birkenhead or Wirral more widely. And they have had such a wretched time. They've, in many cases, lost weeks out of school. They spent periods when they couldn't see friends, and it has been a very tough period, especially for those who perhaps live in flats or houses with no gardens. It's not something that they're going to forget quickly. And I think we need to do everything we can to try and get this pool open. It looks as though, obviously, Freedom Day is going to come and go unremarked, but the Prime Minister has now set a terminus date, and there's nobody in this room who's going to question the integrity or the sincerity of the Prime Minister, I'm sure. And the terminus date is the time when all restrictions, COVID restrictions, will be lifted, and that is the 19th of July, and he is not going to resile from that, he has assured us, subject to the review a fortnight in advance. So if we're in a position where there are no COVID restrictions, and we've got a fund pool that can be used, and we've got youngsters who want to use it, why don't we do it? Obviously, we do have to take very careful note of what the Director of Public Health has been saying to us. Clearly, if it were today, we could not think of opening it. But the situation is so fluid that if we do find ourselves in that position where there are no COVID restrictions in place any longer, I would hope that we could get that pool open and make use of it during the summer period, because it is only during that summer period that it generates enough income to cover its costs. In fact, it makes a substantial profit during those weeks, but during most of the rest of the year, of course, it runs at a loss, which is why it was cut from the budget in the first place. So I sense I'm perhaps a lone voice on this, but I would hope that we could agree option B, subject to there being no further restrictions imposed by the government.
Thank you. So that's an amendment. Do you want just to quickly write something to that effect, or?
I think what is being is a motion is being proposed by Councillor Brame that we adopt paragraph B. So we need a seconder.
I'm happy to second, Chair.
I did add the words something like subject to there being no further restrictions imposed by the government.
Councillor Booth, did you want to come in?
It kind of related to Councillor Brame's point in relation to the new space. If the fund pool was to go, what would be the provision for younger people, or is there provision for younger people, say a gym session for younger people? Or I know it's hard to control children running about if there's a gym session or something, but obviously we have to take into account their mental health going forward with COVID. So it was just related to the new space, and if there is any provisions for a separate space for younger people, that was all. Whether that can be put into planning or anything like that, I'm not sure. Thanks,
Chair, can we move to a vote?
Councillor Cleary.
Sorry, Chair, I think he was going to come back on.
Sorry, I was interrupted. Do you want to come back to Max's question?
So thanks, Councillor. I mean, we'll certainly look at because we've got no decision, we've not kind of planned anything too much around this, because when you tend to do those things, there is another cost implication. Certainly we can look at things for young people. We can look at subsidised activities on that space. We could even look at, there is an alternative leisure pool in Guinea Gap. Granted, it's not Europa. It doesn't have the bells and whistles and flumes and things. There's maybe something we could do there, or at another site around maybe some inflatables or those type of things to try and bring a little bit of fun. But again, what's been at the forefront of our mind with this is firstly safety, and secondly the budget. So those two things have form the basis of this whole discussion. So yes, there are things we can do, but I wouldn't do anything until we kind of know which way we're going with this, because like I said, we are at that kind of fork in the road. One way carries lots of risk and lots of potential cost. The other way, we can still do something, but we can formulate what that might look like.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary and Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like a bit of clarification, really. I want to be really clear in my own mind. If we get to the 19th of July, and if Boris Johnson keeps his word and restrictions are lifted, and if we just put the public health advice to one side for a second, then legally, can we open the fund pool at full capacity? Is that the situation? If restrictions are lifted on the 19th of July, can we open the fund pool at full capacity? And secondly, what happens if the government does that, but our Director of Public Health is still telling us it's not safe to reopen the fund pool? What kind of a situation are we in then if we're faced with that kind of position?
Thank you. I'm assuming this comes back to the Health and Safety Act. Are you happy to respond to that? Because I'm not familiar with the Health and Safety Act.
I'm sorry, I don't know about the Health and Safety Act, but I think you're in the same position probably as the national government. In some respects, it's the data's telling you this, but you need to make the policy. So, Councillor Cleary, I think it's really, somebody said it's a very fluid situation at the moment. So, I think what I said was that if the cases on our situation was as it is now on the 19th of July, I would suggest it would be very difficult to open up the fund pool. But nationally, they might be saying, yes, you can do that. But locally, we've got very high case numbers.
Did you come back, did you?
Yeah. I appreciate it's really, really difficult. And I put this dilemma up on social media, and apart from the fact that most people wanted the fund pool reopened, there's huge pent-up demand. A lot of people said, oh, I'm glad I'm not in your situation having to make these decisions. So, yeah, it's really difficult. But I just want to understand the process. I mean, what is going to happen in Wirral if legally we can open up the thing at full capacity, but the Director of Public Health is telling us we shouldn't? What is the decision-making route as a council that leads us then to do one thing or the other? Do we just take our steer from what this committee says tonight?
I assume looking at all the detailed costings that have gone, I'm assuming that we're trying to make a decision really about, during the most profitable period, can we make this viable, as everyone is trying to do? But health and safety legislation, I think, trumps COVID advice. So once we're beyond all restrictions ended, it defaults back to current health and safety. So I think the concern currently is which option is best given how much we have to spend. Will it break even, or will we incur more of a loss in really trying to help people who've had a very difficult year get back to some fun? So we have an amended motion that we need to go to. Did you want to suggest something else, or?
No, I'm trying to be clear in my own mind exactly. I want to understand it as best as I possibly can, because the government policy is clear. We're reopening on the 19th of July. Okay, I accept that might change because lots of things have changed with the government. I think what the Director of Public Health is saying is that, well, where we are today, we couldn't reopen, and I'm getting the strong steer that the advice is that in 4 weeks' time, we shouldn't be reopening either. That's really what the Director of Public Health is saying. So, it sounds like we can reopen because that's the government policy, but the Director of Public Health is saying that we shouldn't, and therefore we have to make a decision based on a crystal ball, really.
So in essence, are you happy to proceed with some of the costs that will be incurred becomes the question, doesn't it, when we're not sure of what will happen? So we have a couple of choices, but we need to understand whether we're being financially prudent when we're being given advice that's quite prudent. So is there something you want to formally move, or do we want to go to what we have currently on the table?
No, I'm happy to go to a vote, because we have to vote on this. We have to make a decision, and we have all the costs in the paperwork. They've been set out very clearly what the different implications are. It's just we don't know where we're going to be in 4 weeks' time. That's obviously the dilemma.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've got this national position here, which we're talking about the 19th of July, which hopefully will go ahead. But we have a localised position, which is very different from the national position. And our Director of Public Health is very clearly, I think, giving us a steer that this data here is high, and the residual data 2, 3, 4 weeks down the line might still be very high. In which case, if we go ahead, we're making a decision here without knowing the data. So we're almost, as Councillor Cleary was saying, we're in a very difficult situation trying to make a decision without knowing what it will be like in 4 weeks' time. But nonetheless, we're called to make that decision. My concern, I think, is that we will, if we went ahead, incur a lot of costs. We might open up, and then, or we might not be. We might be encouraged not to open up, and hence all those costs are sunk, and we effectively will lose council money at a time when we need to be very cautious about council money. So I like the idea of reusing that space potentially, as Councillor Booth was talking about, and using that space very clearly for a local offering, because I think currently, as it stands now, the steer we're getting locally is that it's serious, and we need to be mindful of that. I don't see how we can make a decision to open with that localised advice. Thank you.
Everybody happy to go to the vote now? We have. Do you want to propose you've proposed and it's seconded? Do we want to take that by assent if you want to read it out?
Sorry, yes. Instructing Director of Neighbourhood Services to undertake and facilitate necessary steps for the reopening of the leisure pool for the 2021 school summer holiday beginning on the 19th of July, subject to there being no further restrictions on that date. That's I think is being moved.
Yes, no, there'll be no restrictions.
Yes, subject to there being no restrictions, yes. Yes, no restrictions, that's right, yeah.
Would you take that by roll call, please?
Okay, right. All those in favour of the motion, raise their hands. Yeah. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5. No, it's 1, 2, 6. 6 in favour. All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that motion is carried.
Thank you. Would anybody like to take a comfort break, or do we want to just plough on through? Keep going. Okay, we shall do just that. Sorry? We'll just take a 2-minute comfort break then. Thank you. We now move on to the Capital and Revenue Budget Monitoring Quarter 4, which is item 9, pages 53 to 60 of your report. I'd like to invite Chair Halewood to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. Evening members, so this is a report, it's a retrospective report as it reports the year-end position for the committee, the financial position last year, year 2021. The position is draft at the moment as the accounts are still subject to full external audit, and the full out-turn position for the whole council will be reported to Policy and Resources Committee on the 30th of June. That will also still remain draft until the accounts are fully audited. So the position for the committee at the end of the year is reporting a 7.2 million adverse variance. So that's an overspend in terms of revenue. And this is made up of a number of reasons. So there are some adverse variances within areas of the committee. For example, in community patrol, there's a small overspend there. There are some favourable variances that we can report to the committee, which is in a one-off surplus saving in respect of pension costs, pension credit, excuse me, that was allocated to the directorate at the end of the year, and also some additional savings from tourism and visitor economy, as we've not been able to provide any events because of COVID. Those small underspends or favourable variances are offsetting the main reason for the adverse variance, which is the loss of income throughout the year on leisure libraries and the Floral Pavilion and golf. And that's, as we know, as a result of the facilities being closed, not being able to open because of the situation with regards to COVID-19. There is some compensation for this lost income. So the government has had a compensation scheme, and that compensation scheme represents the first 5% of any lost income will be discounted, and then the compensation the government will provide is 75% of any losses as a result of COVID-19. This doesn't always work out exactly because there are some nuances within the criteria for claiming back compensation. So some things can be is eligible and some things aren't. And also the 5% budget is actually, the 5% disregard at the start is actually 5% of the whole council's income budget. So it is slightly off. But just to make the committee aware that that's 7.2 million, there is some, as I say, compensation being able to be recouped as a result of that. This hasn't been reported as a specific amount to the committee, as it's actually been counted as a whole across the whole of the council. And you'll see this in the report that comes to Policy and Resources on the 30th of June. The total income received for the whole council as a result of the government's compensation scheme is just over 11 million. And the majority of that will be related to this committee because the majority of income receivable within the council is from leisure and culture and the Floral Pavilion. Just in terms of moving on to capital then, the capital programme has been increased as we've gone on throughout the year. The majority of the capital programme relates to leisure. While we had a relaxing of lockdown for a short period during the summer, there was an opportunity there where we thought that we would be able to accelerate some of the capital works within the committee and the areas relating to the committee. Unfortunately then, because we went back into lockdown, we had not been able to do that, which is why you'll see the revised programme increased, and then the actual spend in the table at 3.3 at table 2 is a very low amount of actually we've been spent from the capital programme. The majority of that will be carried forward to next year, so we can actually carry forward capital spend because it is on a rolling programme. So those schemes that weren't achieved this year or started or finished this year will be carried forward, the majority of them to next year, and they will be achieved then. And that's it. Thank you, Chair. From me.
Thank you, Chair. So bearing in mind, we're requested to note the report, but does any members have any questions about it? Councillor Gilchrist.
Can I be the usual sort of awkward person? The capital programme we can roll forward, but are there any schemes that we could reasonably substitute? Because I'm thinking that a capital can, over £10,000 schemes can cost us capital. I regularly visit a local cemetery where I'm not happy about the condition of paths and footways and things. I'm wondering whether, as part of seeing whether we can upgrade facilities, partly as a mark of respect at this difficult year, we could actually move some projects forward into a capital scheme to improve aspects of our cemeteries as a way of finding a good use for the possibility of capital.
Are you happy to respond? Thanks.
Yep, thank you, Chair, through you. Thanks, Councillor Gilchrist. Yes, I mean, you're right, we have, with the capital programmes agreed at full council in March, and as a result of that, there are borrowing costs, and those borrowing costs are built into the revenue budget. So as long as we stay within the whole capital programme, if there is slippage in some of the other schemes, or if the committee indeed want to rebadge some of the schemes or reprofile some of the schemes that are already included within there, there is delegation to the committee to actually via some budget from one scheme to another. In the next report that I'll come on to in a minute, I'll be describing one of the recommendations is to hold a budget workshop, and one of the pieces of information that we'll be bringing to the budget workshop is the full capital programme for the committee. So that would be an opportunity maybe there for the committee to have a look at what's in the capital programme and take a view as to whether you want to via any schemes there.
For taking that question, Chair and Chair, might I ask if officers would go away and perhaps think about possible schemes of that nature before the workshop? I'm thinking, as I mentioned, particularly of paths and access roads. I can think of one cemetery, others I'm not familiar with, but my belief would be that there would be schemes we could pull together as a package that would be beneficial to visitors, residents, and to those attending funerals.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we can take that away. Obviously, that would come under our Environment Committee, but in the broader sense of the word, we can look at the capital programme. But for this committee, I think we'd be wanting as well to focus on our leisure, culture, floral, those assets, and looking at some of those capital schemes there and what we can do. But yeah, take it away.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Are we happy to agree to note the year-end revenue outturn position of 7.256 million is adverse, and the performance of the capital programme as reported at Q4, April to March of 2020-21. Are we happy to agree by assent? Thank you. That brings us on to item 10 on pages 61 to 78. I'd invite Chair Harewood again to present this report, which is the budget monitoring and the 22-23 budget process. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this report follows on from a report that was taken to Policy and Resources Committee on the 17th of March this year, which actually highlighted a new process, a more robust process for monitoring this year's budget 21-22, and also for an early start for budget setting for next year 22-23. So in terms of the information in the report, it highlights the actual process that we had agreed at Policy and Resources Committee in March for budget monitoring. So it will follow a similar process as it has in previous years, where we'll be providing quarterly reports to the committee in retrospect in terms of the performance of the financial capital and revenue for the committee. This will include some further information, which will be a report on the savings that the council agreed in March that is relevant to the committee, and the performance of those savings, so whether they are being achieved or not. Also, I was conscious that the committee has not had oversight of the reserves position previously, and the value of the reserves and the movement in reserves. So we will bring a reserves position as part of that budget monitoring to the committee on a quarterly basis as well. And then any other specific relevant information that the committee would want. And what we're trying to do this year is try and align performance to finance as well, so you get a bit more data in terms of the non-financial performance and how that relates to the financial performance of the committee. So just in terms of the committee's responsibility, I suppose, in managing the budget for this year, there are, in Appendix 1, it does highlight the progress so far on the savings that were agreed at full council in March. More or less all the savings are due to be on target for the committee for this year. There is only one which is flagged as amber, which relates to culture and visitor economy. And it wasn't my intention really to debate those savings tonight. One of the recommendations in the report is to actually convene a budget workshop. So last year, each of the committees convened budget workshops and to recommence those workshops as soon as possible so the committee really can have a really good look at what's included within the budget for the committee. And that will include a line-by-line budget book as well, so that you'll have a lot more information available to you to make informed decisions. So in the workshop, one of the recommendations will be that you have a look to see whether those savings targets will be achievable for the year, and if they're not, to consider, on the advice of officers, mitigating savings to be able to make sure that the committee can stay within its budget for the full year. There's the second section in the report, which is at 3.12, is on zero-based budgeting. And the original, I think, recommendation was that as a result of the saving agreed by full council in March of 170,000 from undertaking a zero-based budgeting process, recommendation, and this recommendation is in, I've prepared a suite of reports that are going to all the committees along the same lines in June, for all the committees to commence zero-based budgeting. However, at the Policy and Resources Committee last Wednesday, it was agreed that we would have a pilot zero-basing, and the Adult Care and Health Committee would start with a pilot to zero-basing, really get a proper look into it, and then to build a framework for the other committees to follow once we know how long it'll take and how easy, I suppose, or difficult it is, and what resources are required. So the zero-based budgeting, although it is important and it will come to the committee sometime, actually it won't be for this financial year. And then the final part in the report is relating to next year's budget, so 22-23 budget setting. Most members will remember and will be aware that we didn't actually start the budget setting process for this year until really late, sort of October, November time, and it was a very difficult position to be in. It was an officer-led budget because it was a transition year because we had moved from the cabinet system into the committee system. So this year the intention is to start the budget setting process now, really early, and members may remember that one of the requisites for the Council's application for capitalisation directive or exceptional financial support was to produce to MHCLG a five-year balanced medium-term financial plan. So within that plan, there were savings proposals that were relevant to the committee, and they're in Appendix 3. And again, not specifically the intention to go through those tonight, but for officers to bring those to the budget workshop, explain what those savings are, and then for the committee in that workshop to determine whether you want to take the savings put forward by officers or whether you want to actually come up with your own savings for officers to look at instead, or actually a bit of both. You could take a hybrid approach. And that's it, I think, Chair. There is a couple of appendices there in terms of, as I say, there is an appendix on the savings to date for this year, an appendix on the reserves for the committee, and some of those reserves actually because the reserves at the moment within how we report are directorate-based. Our financial system can only cope with one set of reporting, which is directorate-based. So we have to have a human intervention to actually split it into committee-based. And I'm not entirely sure that all those reserves are specifically related to this committee. They could cut across some other committees. So there'll be an opportunity at the workshop again for members to have a look at those and see whether they are relevant to this committee or not. And then the final appendix, as I say, is the savings that we will, officers will bring forward to the workshop for members to consider whether they want to take them forward into next year's budget setting process or not. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate with your team, with its year end and the systems that you have, it has been difficult, but I did request that our budget be split out into controllable and non-controllable, and you have managed to give us some of those headlines, which I do appreciate. Any questions for Chair? Councillor Spriggs, and then Councillor Kenny, and then Councillor Johnson.
Really briefly, Chair, thank you for that report. Just in the budget setting workshops, are we going to have opportunities to talk about income generation as well? Because you didn't mention that, but I'm sure that that is something that, you know, we could do a lot more on. I'm sure we could. Thanks.
Yeah, apologies, Councillor Spriggs. Absolutely, yes. The more income we can generate as a council means, you know, we have to make less savings elsewhere. So yeah, absolutely, that would be one of the fundamental things.
Thank you, Councillor Kenny.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Again, thanks, Chair, for the comprehensive report. My question really is in relation to recommendations 2 and 3. Where it refers to going back to the Policy and Resources Committee at their October meeting. Now, I know we've got a meeting of this committee on, I think it's the 12th of October, so I'm not sure whether the Policy and Resources Committee is either before or after, but in either event, I know it's June now, but we're heading into the summer. It seems to me it doesn't give us a lot of time to be able to come up with anything specific. I mean, October might seem a long way away at the moment, but it's not going to be in real terms. I mean, are you happy, Chair, that it would give us enough time for this committee to identify any budget proposals, etc., and to draw something up and agree to go back in line with the timescale you've outlined here? I'm just concerned it's a bit tight. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kenny. You're right, it is tight, but the budget setting process is really tight. So we have to set a legal budget by law by the 11th of March every year. It will go to Budget Council in March, and then there needs to be preceding that a good period of budget consultation where we can have a really meaningful consultation with residents, with members, with staff, you know, interested parties. Last year, our consultation timetable was really tight, and you know, although we did allow, I think it was a 4-week consultation period. You know, normally it will be a longer consultation period, and we would normally go out for consultation in November. So if the Policy and Resources Committee were agreeing proposals to go out in November, then ideally proposals need to be brought back to them in the October committee for them to agree whether those proposals would go out in November or not. It will be tight to get all these proposals in. What I would say is that we already have a large suite of proposals on the table that officers have already come up with, and we have been working up business cases for you as a committee, and we will bring those into the workshops. So, you know, if you're happy with those, in theory, we already have sort of, 75% of the budgets. If all of the committees happy to agree all of the proposals, we already have sort of 75% of the budget there ready for consultation. So it would only be anything extra that you might want to come up with yourself that we could task officers back to go and have a look at. And if the workshop was soon, so if we were talking about, you know, the first week in July, if we could get one in then that would give us enough time for officers to be able to scope those proposals up, bring them back to you probably in August or the end of July for you to have another look at. And that would be able to be in line with the timescale for October. But I do agree with you, it is tight. But I think everybody would prefer that we were on the front foot this year, given, you know, the situation we were in last year when it was a very difficult situation to get the budget balanced.
Thank you. And I would suggest some of the workshops, actually, because they'll be done via Teams, we could possibly fit them in and work through some good ideas. We'll have an awful lot more time than we did last year. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chair. I'd just like more information, please. So a request when you've got in Appendix 1, the income from West Kirby catering offer, you've got as 0.035 million. And the information we were given tonight is income suggested as 662,924 and profitability of about 107,000. I'd like to know how those figures correlate, and I'd like a breakdown, please, specifically of that. Given this is a new venture, it's all, in every sense it's new, I think we need to monitor it very closely and carefully. So I'd like a breakdown of the statistics, please, and the figures relating to that, the income and proposed costs as well. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Johnson. I think just to give you a bit of where those figures came from originally. So those figures were included within this year's budget, which was agreed at full council on the 1st of March. So they were really early figures and they were based on estimates. So, and we actually went low because the figures included in the budget is 35,000. And as you know, the managers of the Floral managers mentioned tonight, we are actually hoping to exceed those figures now with more information that we've actually had since then. So that 35,000 was really in a very early sort of estimate, and it was a prudent estimate just to make sure that we weren't overestimating before we were able to you know, prepare some more information.
Thank you. Councillor Gilchrist.
Just trying not to be the awkward squad. Years ago, and I'm going back a long time, we used to have a thing called cost centre budgets, and there was a booklet for virtually every business, every home, council care home, you name it. It had a page in the booklet. But I realised that the world's changed. So I'm wondering if, in following on from what Councillor Johnson was asking, whether there is a sort of cost centre accounting system set up for this enterprise. Often you load onto them various overheads, presumably there are overheads for keeping the premises open longer or whatever, or for training costs, but is there a worked up system of recording this that can be pulled together easily without using our antique system and Excel and things?
Thank you, Councillor Gilchrist. We do have a system. It's 15 years old, and we are in the process of replacing it. So the new system will come into force from the 1st of April next year. The finance team are taken up quite a lot of their time at the moment with working to replace that new system and sort of data cleansing all the information that we've got within the current system. The current system, because it is really out of date, a lot of the cost centre, we do have cost centres, a lot of the cost centre names and the descriptions of the expenditure is really out of date. And I mean, when I see it, I have to ask questions as to what does this one mean, what does this one mean. The finance team who are using it are familiar with it, so they can use it all the time. So, I mean, we do have something. I don't think it would be beneficial to provide you with something because it would be reams and reams of information. And I would be hesitant and reluctant to ask the finance team to actually spend a lot of time in actually sort of manipulating that information to get it into a fit state so that, you know, we have a sort of like a budget book, I think is what maybe what you're talking about. What we are producing though is a high level budget book which will be published and will be available to the public. Which won't go into cost centre level, but it would go into, I think it goes into service level. We're in the process of producing that at the moment. But as I described just previously, when we have the budget, so when you have the budget workshops, we'll be providing some more budget information to you. So for example, there will be a budget for each leisure centre, each golf course, each library, and that will be by expenditure and income. So that will be able to give you information on how much you know, each individual services cost and how much income is generated from each individual service. Now, if you want any more information on specific areas at the workshop, we can then provide that. But I'm kind of reluctant to provide everything in one go because it will take an awful lot of time. But as I say, you know, if there is anything specific you want more information on, we could look to provide that to you, absolutely.
Well, thank you, Chair, for that. I'm familiar with that. You'll forgive me, Chair. The question was particularly directed at the new project that Councillor Johnson was describing. I'm assuming something new set up has its own happy little lines.
Sorry, Councillor Gilchrist, I gave you a very lengthy explanation of why we can't produce a budget book, which you didn't really want. But yes, you're correct. Yes, when we have the West Kirby, the loft sale, there will be a specific cost centre for that, and all the costs and the income will be included in a specific cost centre, so we will be able to identify that separately.
Thank you. All the other information was valuable because we really want to improve the budgeting process. So are we happy to go to the vote now? Do you want me to read the recommendations on pages 62 to 63, or are you all happy with them? Because there's only one caveat on recommendation 4, which is about the adult care and health will start the zero-based budgeting, which is agreed at P&R. But all the others are laid out there. So I'd like to say, I'll formally propose it, but I would like a seconder. Happy to second, Councillor Spriggs? Yeah. And then we can all agree by assent. Can we? Great. So we need to move on to item 11, pages 79 to 84, which is the appointment of statutory advisory committees and working parties for 21-22. And I'd just like to read a statement in relation to this. Appointments to the Birkenhead Park and Hilbury Island Advisory Committees are to be referred to the Environment Committee for consideration, as that committee has responsibility for parks, open spaces, countryside management, and fulfills the Council's duties as a coastal protection authority. The Environment Committee's terms of reference are therefore a closer fit than tourism's in relation to the work of these two consultative committees. Pending consideration of this matter by the Environment Committee, the membership of the advisory committees shall remain as presently constituted in respect of those persons who are members of the Council. Does anybody have any questions around this? Councillor Spriggs.
Thank you very much, Chair. I know I'm not the only person who's had some questions there, and I think Councillor Brain also has already raised an email question about this. We've obviously been having a conversation about it, and really what we are a little bit concerned about are two things, really. One is this, currently this is where these advisory positions sit with this committee, and in terms of Birkenhead Park, for example, it isn't a simple issue of should it be in environment, should it be in should it be in this committee. It should be both. It needs to be a joined up sort of relationship. And in terms of how important the park is and can be around tourism, heritage, culture, we would be a little bit concerned about losing that opportunity to be part of that conversation. So I would definitely ask the committee to have a think about that, and certainly work in a more joined up way with environment on it. That obviously makes loads of sense. In terms of Hilbury, it makes more sense that it does go into environment, obviously, but there are still some questions around tourism and heritage. So, again, the sensible approach is a joined up approach on both of them, but particularly Birkenhead Park, I do think, does still fit very, very closely and aligns very closely with so much of what this committee is about. Thanks.
I'd like to echo that, really, and we will work and we will be joined up because we do have a directorate that we're both two halves of. So yes, across two committees, a lot of these things will always be. But I do share your reservation about Birkenhead Park. I've sat on that advisory committee for, well, it's 2 years because it rolled on, and I've attended everything, and I'm really keen to see if they will get the applications or the grant for the Heritage Fund, and to get heritage status as a park would be brilliant. And it would, if it could, if we had that good news to coincide with the 175th anniversary, I think that would be ideal. So I do have strong reservations about that. The Environment Committee doesn't meet, I think, until September. And so we have the ability here to keep the members as constituted currently on that committee, and I think Councillor Cleary, you're also on that as well, and I think there's possibly and naturally yes, so I didn't want to split these two things out and take a separate vote. They will meet in September, and we will retain these positions until then, and who knows what will happen by then. But yes, I did have the reservations you had. Hilbury Island does tend to sit more with the coastal elements, but I didn't see Birkenhead Park as a normal park. It's a very exceptional park. But I am happy to recommend that. I need a proposer and a seconder.
Chair, could I just Rather than doing either of those things, could I just suggest, if there are going to be some vacancies because of people no longer on the council, could we delegate it to party spokes to appoint somebody from their group?
I think that may have already been done when all the appointments are covered with leaders. Am I correct in assuming? I think yes, because Councillor Muspratt was on one in particular, then the Hoylake one. I think what we're saying is the members of those committees who are currently on it from this new year will remain on it. Does that satisfy your concerns, or did you want to propose?
Presumably those people who are no longer on the council can't be on it, so who's going to take their place? So I was just trying to think of a mechanism to...
I think their place was taken when all the leaders agreed all the committee places, but I'm happy that we can try and check that. But I thought they had been... existing members stayed on, new members were proposed, but it was all part of committee places. I'm happy to take advice on that.
That's above my pay grade.
It is a... You could authorise the relevant group leaders to fill any vacancies in respect of those current or those former members of the advisory committees who belong to that particular party. You could do it that way, yes.
We were trying to respond to your initial point, so I think we need to do that first, maybe. I think we've slightly muddied the waters, but it's okay.
So I'm pretty confident in regards to Hilbury that we made a new appointment of a local ward councillor. I'm less clear on who was to join myself and lots of others. So there are 3 people also on the Birkenhead Advisory Committee. Did you suggest somebody else via your group leader to join us? So we're not clear that that's happened. So can we slightly amend this, or just include that as presently constituted in respect of those persons who are members of the council and substitute members where leaders propose?
Nominated by the group leaders in relation to those former members of the consultative committees that are no longer councillors, basically. That's it. That's it.
Councillor Wood.
Thanks, Chair. Just for clarification then, is if that goes through, then those, what you're saying is that by September, when it goes through to Environment Committee, there would be a change of persons on those committees, on both of them, or I've probably misunderstood. Sorry, if you just could clarify for me, please.
It would conflate into things a little bit here.
I'm just a bit confused with the question that's come afterwards.
Yes, so the committee's moving is because they seem to be best placed there. But obviously the members on that we've said they're presently constituted, that would be then even up for discussion by the subsequent March. So I think what we're saying here is September to March, and I'm sure members of the Environment Committee may be minded to keep the continuity. I can't assure that. But certainly in respect of Hilbury and local ward councillors, I would have thought that makes perfect sense for continuity, people who have already sat on these committees and see it through. But as with all committees, I believe you do need a bit of a refresh from time to time. So there could be new members added, but it may not be within this financial year. But as it stands slightly amended, are we happy to agree this as a committee?
Sorry to be being a bit like this at this time of the evening, but I thought what we were talking about originally was that we felt very strongly that we should be keeping the advisory capacity of this committee for Birkenhead Park within this committee, and actually disagreeing with officers that the natural place for it to go was environment. That's what I thought we were talking about earlier. So I'd like to propose that then.
Well, what we can do is we can take the same recommendation for both different committees, and we can do that probably by a roll call, because maybe, unless we wanted to amend that slightly and say we retain Birkenhead Park until after the 175th anniversary, because that sits, for me personally, I think that sits much more naturally within this committee. So that's something we could vote, or you could say we want to keep it permanently, but again, this committee will change. So you're saying you want to keep it permanently, and it could change again next May. But I'm happy to take them separately if you're able to support me on that, Colin. Is that something you're able to help me with, taking two separate?
I think what Councillor Wood is proposing is that the Tourism Committee retain responsibility for appointing its nominees to the Birkenhead Park Advisory Committee.
That's correct.
I think that's what is being proposed. And you're proposing that, notwithstanding that the responsibility for the finance and management of Birkenhead Park is with the Environment Committee. Under the terms of reference of the set out by the Council, the responsibility for parks and open spaces is with the Environment Committee, and that is...
Highlighted the fact that the issue with Birkenhead Park is quite, it's very much sits into the into our committee, into the Tourist Committee, very much because of the it's the world, it's going for World Heritage status. So the heritage culture, area of this are exceptional, and it very much sits in this committee. We've already done a lot of work on this, so obviously we want to move forward in that regard. So that's my comments on
And in
that.
addition, thank you, Solicitor. We're actually debating the report summary, which is and the recommendations for the Tourism Committee's Culture and Leisure Committee, appointment of statutory advisory committees and working parties. And the recommendations are, this committee is requested to authorise the monitoring officer as proper officer to carry out the wishes of the group leaders in allocating members to membership of the Birkenhead Park Advisory Committee and Hilbury Island Nature Reserve Management Committee, and to appoint those members with effect from the date at which the proper officer is advised of the names of such members. So that's what... But
sorry,
I know you've brought additional information
you're reading the
tonight,
paper,
Chair.
but I did read the statement before.
But I think it needed repeating because
what we have published, yes, what we have published doesn't reflect the statements that I've just read.
Which are officer statements, they're not statements by this committee.
I think just to clarify.
In other words, they're officer proposals that we're debating, and we're saying we don't agree with the Birkenhead Park removal of crop.
Yes, I think. Is that the Tourism Committee retain responsibility for the appointment of the Advisory Committee for Birkenhead Park, and I think that's going to be we can vote on that.
So we retain the appointments
to
that committee.
Yes, that is being proposed. Yes, is that seconded by anyone? Yes, so seconded. So maybe we could take a vote on that. I think that's the.
Yeah, so the Environment Committee's terms of reference are a closer fit.
No. What the...
And so it moves, but we retain the appointments.
What is being said is that it's we should retain, or this committee should retain responsibility for making the appointments to the Birkenhead Park Advisory Committee, notwithstanding the Environment Committee's. Yes, that's it. Yeah. So.
Thank you. So that's been proposed and seconded. Councillor Cleary?
Just to clarify, does that mean that appointments to the Birkenhead Park Management Committee have to come from members of this committee? That's what it means.
Member appointments, there's obviously some really passionate, really interested external people on these committees as well, which is why it's a great mix. But yes, members appointed to these committees would be retained by this committee.
Sorry, could I just come back in? It's just that obviously I was on that committee without being a member of this committee. Now I know we've been through a transition period, but I'm just a bit concerned if you've got a political group that isn't represented on this committee, then they don't necessarily get representation on the Birkenhead Park Management Committee. That's the implication of what's just been moved then.
So you're concerned that we can't have proportionality if we are appointing from this committee. We can't have true proportionality onto the... I don't think they always have been, but I appreciate they've always included members from the parties that are represented here.
So maybe legal could advise on the proportionality issue.
No, you don't have to appoint according to proportionality for these consultative committees.
So that's clarified that, and we still have on the table proposed and seconded that this committee retains the appointments. Are we happy to agree that by assent? Yes, thank you. And then the original statement must refer then to Hilbre Island. Can I have a Hilbre Island Advisory? Can I have a proposer and a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Brame. I didn't hear, sorry.
Just to clarify, what is being proposed in relation to...
The original.
Oh, I see.
The original request now only relates to Hilbre Island Advisory Committee. Can we agree that by assent?
So Hilbre Island would be referred to the Environment Committee. That's it.
Yes.
That's by assent, is it? Is that by assent? Yes, good, jolly good.
Item 12, the Heritage Champion, pages 85 to 88. We have a report which I'm happy for Councillor Williams to present.
Happy to, obviously, it's quite an extensive report there. I'm happy to answer any questions on it. As I've put in the report, everything is going well at all levels. We have quite a few items on the agenda, but there's no problem with it from a point of view of, the way the staff have been fantastic. We're having regular meetings. I have 2 weekly meetings, by the way. On heritage issues, but as I mentioned previously, it's absolutely vital that we get all these initiatives really very much that they're moving quickly to take on all the changing circumstances that are happening at this moment of time. But I will say, I think we're in one of the best positions from a heritage standpoint that we've been in for years. There are problems in one or two areas that we need to sort things out, but generally it's been a very, very positive year, and I would like to thank the staff. But also I think this isn't, very much a political post, and I would like to, as I mentioned in the report, to thank the support that we've had from all parties over the years on heritage, because we've always been singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak. And that's it, really. But I will answer any questions if anyone has any, no problem.
Yes. Councillor Spriggs.
Sorry for talking so many times this evening, Chair. I'd just like to say the report is excellent. Thank you, Jerry. I read it, and I think it's great to be able to say, how proud we are of what a fantastic champion for heritage, Jerry, you are and have been in the borough. Your expertise, your knowledge, your support of staff, the way you champion them is really exemplary. And thank you very much for the really detailed report.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. So we can move on to the appointment. The Tourism and Communities Culture and Leisure Committee appoints a member champion in relation to matters concerning the borough's heritage. Do I have somebody you've nominated?
I'd like to nominate Jerry Williams, Councillor Jerry Williams.
I'm happy to second Councillor Jerry Williams. Congratulations. Thank you.
Indeed, it's a pleasure.
Item 13, we're getting there. The work programme update. We already had a couple of things mentioned within the debates on other items. You have a report on 89 to 98. We did have quite a busy work programme on this committee previously, and we actually then suggested we put another committee meeting in for July because the work programme was quite extensive. But with that in mind, I'd already mentioned the Williamson. I would like to look at that to make sure that the user groups can all return and none of their own funding is impacted by the limited hours, although I appreciate that was a soft opening and we're not to full capacity yet. So we want to revisit the efficiency savings of the Williamson and then do that in probably a workshop, and that can be fitted in quite quickly with something else. So it doesn't really add anything substantial. And then, as we mentioned before, the events need to be added. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add?
Just, Chair, I'd flag up again the question I asked earlier on. It would be really great as part of that review of the Williamson to get a bit of a more of a detailed outline of what the cultural programme and creative programme is going to be for the coming year, not least because we need to start thinking about how we rebuild for the Food and Drink Festival, which we know was announced this evening as being pushed back till September 2022, sadly, but that's understandable. So how are we going to make sure that we really start to support all of that on this committee, and then at the same time start to be able to look at areas of income generation, where we can start to find more funding support. Mr. Atkinson mentioned earlier about library funding, the Arts Council. I mean, there's substantial funding I think we can start to be thinking about. So, that would be great to add to that add to that workshop. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think a lot of what you've described there relates to the budget workshop. That is the perfect place for those elements to be brought back about income generation. But what we can add to the work programme is events, the cultural programme, etc., etc. Thank you. Yeah, that's captured. Anything else?
Yeah, I just echo that from the heritage standpoint as well, of course, again, the elements. Yeah.
In support of that, thank you. So is everybody happy to agree that by assent? Delightful, because that brings us to the end of our meeting. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to officers. Thank you for your time.